Hi, I'm Dr. Anthony Everett. I'm with the BSK Theological Seminary. I am also the director of the Siloam Project, in which we bring together our students, our alums, our faculty, all in a community. One of the things at BSK, we're 100% online, and so it's important that we connect together. We've got a studio today a kind of makeshift studio that we put together, a podcast studio, and we've brought together three of our dynamic alums. We have with us Reverend Sarah Turpin. We also have Reverend Sarah Harrington Jones, and we have Reverend Brittany Stillwell. And three of them are with us today. So I want to welcome you all to being with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I had a few questions I wanted to ask you, and it can be more of a conversation. I know you all know each other as well, so that's good, And so, but I just want to get from you, first of all, your context of ministries. You can state your name as you're speaking, and give us the context of your ministry and how BSK has helped in forming where you are today. So. We will start with Sarah Turpin first.
Sure. So I am the senior pastor at Buchel Park Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I have been there since right before I graduated from BSK. So I started there in March of 2013 and graduated in May of 2013. But I've had several different roles, and so currently I'm the senior pastor.
Awesome. So BSK prepares you for being a senior pastor?
Yes,
all right.
Certainly.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Brittany, we've talked on the phone a lot before.
It's good to see you in person.
Likewise. So if you could share with us as well in terms of your ministry and the things that are going on and how BSK has helped informing that for you.
Absolutely. I am an associate pastor at Second Baptist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. Associate pastor does lots of things, but my main responsibilities are to oversee our family ministry. So I hang out with our youth and oversee from birth to 18 and their people. And so it's a rich job with lots of challenges and excitement. BSK prepared me far more than I could have ever imagined. We joke about the things we didn't learn in seminary, but there was so much that I did learn in seminary to get me to this place, both in the local church and then in all the other things that we do as ministers outside of the church. It's been it was a great place to equip me for the ministry.
That's good. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Sarah, if you would share.
Yes, I'm Sarah Harrington Jones, and I absolutely concur with Brittany that we would joke or rib our professors, one of whom is sitting in this room, but we really were well prepared. Currently, I serve as a bivocational minister, and there are more and more of us in the landscape. I serve University Baptist Church in Starkville, Mississippi, where Mississippi State is. And then I also work for Mississippi State through the College of Veterinary Medicine in their overnight ER for animals. BSK prepared me in a number of ways, contextually speaking, so that when the pandemic rolled around and we went online, we knew what Zoom was. And in advanced worship classes, when they said, you might be at a church that's small enough you don't always have a minister of music, or you might have to write a hymn, or you might have to write your liturgy, or whatever it was, again, that sometimes we made fun of, those experiences were invaluable. And then when you're staring at it, hey, I've done this before, I can do this. And you have a wealth of experience behind you because you've had to do it for class. It's also because they put so much emphasis at BSK on pastoral care, counseling, self-care. It has helped me manage both a full-time job and ministry when ministry is never part-time. The self-care has been very important to have that as a part of my life. Also, the pastoral care piece has informed how I am able to work with bereaving situations, bereaved people, stressed out staff in an ER, and things that I never thought that I would be walking into since I'm not chaplaincy. Right. And so BSK just all the way around had exceeded anything I could have imagined or hoped for.
That's great. And so, when I hear each of you talk about your ministries, I hear a certain joy in what you're doing, a certain confidence in what you're doing. And I'd be remiss to not notice that these are three women who are standing in ministry in a world that doesn't celebrate women in ministry, you know. And so, how do you deal with the ideal of what's called imposter syndrome? And anyone can take it, and you just say, because we have two Sarahs, just let us know which one is saying what.
I mean, that's been something I struggle with a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, a lot. Especially, well, being called to ministry at all in any capacity. I struggled to see myself in that capacity. But then also to be called pastor in any way. I think I talk about that a little bit in my call story when I tell it, that I saw that women could be pastors, but you had to be willing to hit that glass ceiling and bear, you know, getting cut. And I didn't know that if I had that or if I wanted to do that. So I believed that women could and should, but didn't know if I would have that to do. So imposter syndrome is something that I think I'm in a better place for, but it's been a long journey and I'm still working on it.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say, this is Brittany, but I would say that that's the one thing BSK didn't prepare me for. And that's in all the good ways, in that when I was in seminary, like, I thought I could do anything and everyone would welcome and love that. And so then when I got out into the trying to find a full-time job world, I discovered that it wasn't as safe and as loving and celebrating of an environment as BSK. And so, yeah, I don't think my imposter syndrome really sunk in until after seminary, because our professors were so encouraging, and I preached my first sermon as part of my education, and like I was just so celebrated that I think I underestimated the rest of the world, and that's when the imposter syndrome really kind of set in. I was talking with some people today at the Baptist Women in Ministry lunch, and every single woman there was naming their imposter syndrome. And so part of the way I think I deal with it is remembering that I'm not alone. And I'm sitting at a table with amazing women. And so if they can do it, I can do it. And yeah, I think I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe I should always have a little bit of imposter syndrome if I'm speaking the gospel. I should tremble a little when I do. Not that I haven't been called or that God hasn't put the words in my heart, but maybe we should tremble a little. So I'll keep a little bit of it, I guess. But yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of, BSK wasn't that helpful in that, but for all the good reasons.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you.
This is the other Sarah Harrington Jones from Mississippi. And I would absolutely agree with Brittany that I felt very affirmed and welcomed in the space of BSK and nurtured in the space of BSK. What I was a little shocked by, and what I hope that we can continue to learn from, is that even in our churches that are aligned with more progressive ideas, that we still bump into whether we can live into our calling is one thing, and whether we experience imposter syndrome is one thing, but whether these people who say they support women in ministry can actually live into it is another. And that's when, again, that is when imposter syndrome hits, maybe sometimes in a detrimental way, because you think, well, you're saying one thing, but this is not how you're reacting. And so there's still room for growth in our denomination and others that bring alongside women. And much like Brittany said, the encouragement that I still receive from BSK, the faculty, the staff, and the alumni, and the friends that we've made there, help when, like you said, you can look around the room and say, okay, they're doing it, I'm doing it, we've all run into this, and we're all still called.
And trained well.
And trained well, yes.
Awesome. So give me a little more background in terms of your own ministries. Are you at the churches that you were called at? I know you mentioned your story somewhat. If you could kind of go back to that a little bit, but just tell us about, the churches that you're at now, and whether you were called into ministry there or somewhere else, or whether it's, this is brand new. This is like, I'm doing the thing at this point. So, And if we can jump back to you, Sarah Turpin, because you kind of
Sure.
led it into that.
Sure. Well, I didn't grow up going to church regularly. We were a Christian family, but not an every Sunday kind of family. And so I explored religion classes in my undergrad at Georgetown College and ended up majoring in religion, even though I didn't have a clue what I would do with it. I was kind of headed toward nonprofit and did a business degree and thought that seems like something safe that I might be able to do. And I noticed now that I was sensing that calling. I just didn't know what to do with it at the time. So then after I graduated there, I actually got a part-time job as a youth minister, which is the craziest thing because I wasn't even in a church, like going to a church regularly. And I told them that, and I was like really open about it. But I found myself doing ministry and then found BSK. And so I did most of my BSK experience was at that church as a youth minister. And so I spent 4 years exploring calling there. I took kind of a year in between undergrad and seminary to just think about it, whether this is what I wanted to do. But then it really developed from there, and BSK gave me a lot of confidence to say what I believe and to really own that identity as a I don't know if I could say pastor at that point, but minister I could say. I felt like, there was a difference. I don't know that there is, but, and then I found Butyl Park, and I've grown up a whole lot there too. They've ordained me. I've been married there, so I've been there 11 years now. So I've certainly grown in that time quite a bit.
Awesome. Let me jump over to Sarah over here.
So I don't know that anybody can see, but I'm much older and have a longer story, so I'll try to make it short. I am glad that the Spirit continues to pursue us, even when we think we're done. And the Reverend Dr. Chuck Poole has said in one of his benedictions that we are held in hands that will never let us go. And that has been my experience because I grew up in church as a pastor's kid and grandkid during a time that was just horrific in the denomination of my origin. And I was in the town where that denomination was centered. And so I was long since done with denominational life and church. Grateful for other women who stood in those pulpits way back when. One in a church that was a Southern Baptist church, one that was in a church that was a Disciples of Christ church that caught me because they needed a singer in their choir. But to see these women who poured into me, even though they didn't know that they were pouring into me, simply by being in that space. So through that, I served in other capacities. I was not planning on being a stay-at-home mom for a while, but that was the need of my family. And so my first and deepest call was to young children. And from that experience in a congregation, one thing led to another. You were asking about the church where we serve now and how that plays into that role. When my children were little, we lived in a very tiny town in Mississippi, and we would travel 45 minutes to University Baptist Church in Starkville. And we were there when the pastor that recently left came, and so we welcomed him and had friendships, and then we moved off, and we were gone for more than a decade. So when our family was thinking about going to seminary, it was that pastor who had a connection to BSK and really kind of opened the door for that path. And so to find myself back at University Baptist Church after all these years is quite phenomenal, and what a blessing. God just didn't let me go.
Awesome. Brittany?
Yeah, I've been a church rat my whole life. My dad has been an associate pastor, and so I've kind of grown up in the church place. And so my calling from the very beginning was that I love this messy, as a pastor's kid, I understand the messiness of being on staff, but I just the love of this messy group of people that are trying to do what God's calling them to do. And so I kind of sensed a call college-ish, but I said I'm going to go get a music education degree just in case. Didn't want to trust the I didn't trust it. And it's funny, as I look back, I probably should, I was every right not to trust it. And I would say that I was determined to serve at a church that would have a senior pastor. I just wasn't called to be a senior pastor until college, when I was an intern under my first female senior pastor in Birmingham, Alabama, Reverend Sarah Shelton. And that's when I started to realize that pastoring didn't have to look just like I had always experienced it. And yeah, so I taught for a few years before going to seminary, and I let that teaching certificate expire and haven't turned back. And the funny thing is, I never thought, in fact, so Sarah and I were on staff together at Butyl Park when I was in seminary. And I would tell her all the time, I'm not a youth minister. Like, you scare me, I'll do anything else.
Thinking about that right now.
Not youth. And then I was looking for a job, and it was really hard. I couldn't get hired to be a senior pastor right out of seminary, and it was hard looking for jobs. And I finally found a good church in Memphis where I served as music and youth. And it wasn't until they started asking me to come serve that it occurred to me that, oh yeah, I used to work with teenagers and I liked it. And so I've been doing youth ministry ever since. It is a joy. So I've first Memphis, a little stint in South Africa, back to Second Baptist in Little Rock. And so I've been there 5 years now, and it's a church that lets me be a pastor, period. It just happens to be that I pastor the younger side of the congregation, even as I pastor the older side and help them make connections with each other. And so, yeah, fostering that sense of curiosity and learning in the congregation is what gives me life. And so it's been a really cool journey. God's got us figured out before we ever do.
I remember your hesitancy about youth ministry.
Youth ministry
so much.
scared me.
She would be so good at that if she's willing to do it.
To be honest, it still scares me, but we're doing it.
Isn't that part of the job?
That's
You're
right.
always
Absolutely.
scared. It's not just imposter
Terrified.
syndrome. Like, you're always scared a little
yeah.
bit, and
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yeah, that's part of what I've had to deal with as well, being a minister. You never get used to, I am the pastor. You get, it's always still, you're always thinking about, well, do they see me as pastor, or how can I be a better pastor, or whatever, And I think sometimes it's us really that are really looking at it, because of the people out there look at you as pastor. Now I know that's been, I say that, and it's all in the context of where you are in ministry, because I understand Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, for instance, is different from Southern Baptist,
Yeah.
And so our audio engineer is looking at his watch, so I know that we got to wrap it up here, but I want to just ask you all one last question. That question is, what is it that BSK could do to enhance what we've done for you for future students?
I'll jump in since we're on a time clock. There are two things, three.
Okay.
Here we go. The first would be really like a business course about finances. We know that, hey, if you're ordained, your taxes are going to look different. But what does that look like, especially now in bivocational ministry? What does that look like when you're not going to have all this retirement coming, or how you're going to manage your taxes and anything? CBF provides the Church Benefit Board that does a lot of good work with that. And I think, and I have recently been in a group with young students that are coming out of seminary, and they're just overwhelmed. Like, we don't know about investing or who we can call. And if we call Joe Blow, who may be a great investor, they don't know about ordained ministry. And so I think making those connections would be really, really valuable for students and alumni, maybe. I think, I just went blank. I had another one. Oh, the bivocational, because I found myself in bivocational space, multi-vocational space, and there are many, many more of us. Like, how do you navigate, maybe without the resources, but also with a full-time job, the demands that are put on you, and how can you, as BSK always asks us to do, think creatively and outside of the box, how we can kind of meet people where they are. I think that's the wave of the future, and maybe a lot of traditional seminaries are not able to cater to that. And I hope not cater, but I hope that BSK will be responsive to what my lived experience is now and what several others are beginning to find. And then I would just encourage to keep with that contextual piece, because none of the three of us, our ministry doesn't look the same. And so to always bring it back to asking students and to training students to be ever mindful of where you are, what is it in your context, what do you need, and how does ministry look, was invaluable, because it gives you those tools and those questions to ask. So I would say just keep doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, there's a joke that, we didn't learn this in seminary, but where would that end? You
Right.
know?
Right. Oh gosh.
There's always something.
I mean, we could go our whole lives and never learn everything, because this vocation is just so multifaceted.
And ever changing.
They didn't teach me how to, plumb a toilet, but I just had to plunge a toilet, and I just had to do it. But I do say that when I was going there, I do remember quite a few papers that were like, write a children's message if you're a children's minister, or write a letter to a congregant explaining this. And more of those kinds of things I think were really helpful. I can write a paper on what is the Trinity, but how would I explain it to Joe, who comes to ask me, what really is this? How do you explain it in a way that's contextual? Because I'm not going to be writing papers to those folks. I'm going to be having conversations and preaching and teaching in those kinds of ways. So anything that's practical, that is tangible, that's everyday. I know we had a benediction course where we did things like baptism and things like that, but I would love to see that expanded, because that was like at the very end. Things like serving communion, those are things that we do all the time. But I just had to figure out. I still remember the first time I served communion. One of the youth, I put the bread in my mouth before I was supposed to. You were supposed to wait and be hold it up and say that. And I just put it in my mouth, because that's the way I'd done it. And she was like, no. She's on the second row. My youth. But I had not learned that, so I just had to do it. So the practical, I think, is really helpful.
And if I can piggyback, so even after you were there, so I was there after you, they had adapted to hearing those kind of conversations. And so the worship classes, and now they have a whole different way of doing things in hours, since any of the three of us were there. But yes, that advanced worship and where does this look like really is an important piece of ministry. Yeah.
Good.
Excellent.
I would say here to all of that. And then I would also just cheer on what's happening. Yes. We went through BSK before the partnership with Simmons College and the Black Church Studies Institute, and I have been auditing classes to catch up. And I am just so proud of this place and my alma mater, and the continual growth and the next right thing. And I'm really glad that you're here, Dr. Everett, and this contextual emphasis, because online changes the game, and so and the spread across the country changes the game, and so making sure that our students stay connected to the local congregation even as they're learning, or the nonprofit that they're a part of, or the chaplaincy that they're a part of, this is huge. And so I just want to say go BSK, and I'm behind you, and keep going, because the ways that you're growing with us is seen and important.
Thank you very much. I want to thank each one of you, Sarah Harrington-Jones, Sarah Turpin, and Brittany Stilwell. Thank you for being our guest today. I am Dr. Anthony Everett with BSK Theological Seminary.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm David Cassidy, the president at Baptist Seminary of Kentucky, or BSK as we call it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I hope you will take a moment to make a contribution so that we can continue to make excellent content like this podcast and so many others that we have planned. You can do so by going to bsk.edu and click on the Give button. Thank you so much for your support.